You're now listening to the smooth sounds of life after death. I'm your host, the Marcus Garrett. Let's get started with this week's episode. Season 3 of The Marcus Garrett Show is focused on the journey from employee to entrepreneur. You can find a link for a free 30-day trial to join hundreds already in our office hours program in your video description or show notes. Today's guest, actually, let me drop back, and this is the drop. Today's guest is Zeona, the co-host of the Invest to Five podcast, where they teach you how to become financially independent through investing in real estate. Welcome to the show, Zeona.
Thank you so much for having me.
So please do tell the people a little bit about yourself and the podcast.
Oh, well, our podcast is all about financial independence, and it's called Invest to Fi because we really believe that investing in real estate is the fastest way to get to Fi. So we talk mostly about investing in real estate, but some about just creative Fi journeys.
And since we last spoke in darkness, and people just have to take our word for it, that we had one of the most illustrious conversations of podcast that has ever met the internet. It just did not quite make it to the internet. You did let me know that you've written a book, or you have a book coming out. Can you tell folks about the book with no other than Bigger Pockets?
Yeah. Yes, I know. I feel super grateful to be writing with Bigger Pockets. They have a great team. And I'm writing a book on medium-term rentals with Sarah Weaver. So if you guys check out Bigger Pockets, she did an interview recently. And yeah, medium-term rentals they're in the middle, right? So they're not a short-term rental under 30 days. They're not a long-term rental, which is about a year usually. So they're somewhere in that sweet spot of a month to 3 months to 6 months. And it's got its own different strategy. So they're pretty awesome. And we're excited that it's going to come out in December.
So,
writing a book, it's a journey.
I was talking to Vincent, do not want to butcher his last name, of the Total Life Freedom, I believe is the website. Hopefully I haven't butchered that as well. Now I'll get in the show notes correct if not. But he was talking about the book writing process. I think his is coming out in May. So we'll be dropping that episode in April.
Oh, is his last name with a P?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. You're welcome. What you're talking about.
You're welcome.
I don't know how to say that name. No, thank you. Oh man.
So my question is going to be why medium-term rentals? Why is that the topic of conversation?
Yeah, so I come from the space of short-term rentals. I'm kind of known for those, and I did that whole space for 10 years, but I feel like medium-term since COVID has really taken shape. And it's also meeting a need of people that had all these hopes and dreams to do short-term rental, and then it kind of got blown up in their face with regulations coming in. So that sweet spot of 30 days is sort of not seen by cities. So you don't have to have a special license. You don't have to pay short-term rental tax. And so it's actually pretty cool. You're sort of in this like special gray area that works better than long-term and gets you lots of cash flow.
So it's new to me, and then we can, of course, go back to the FI conversation, and maybe this will be a part of it. Sure. What are these new regulations that folks have to overcome?
Oh, so for short-term rentals, it's just that there's been kind of a sweep, probably starting in like 2017, that a lot of different areas, municipalities, certain counties, they all have these rules around, can you short-term rent, can you not short-term rent? Does it have to be your primary residence? So if you went and bought 10 places in the same town, you can't use them anymore, right? So that was really hard for a lot of people, that they made their numbers and their investment strategy only on short term. And then when you only think you can long term, well, gosh, it's a big difference in what you can charge.
Okay. And to that point, a good, easy transfer to the next question I have here. Your focus is on real estate, of course, Bigger Pockets as well. Why should someone choose to invest in real estate versus other streams of investment income, or in addition to other streams, whichever one?
Yeah. So, I mean, you might be surprised to hear this from me, but I don't necessarily think people should invest in real estate. I love it. And if you're someone who's curious about it, lean into it because it's amazing. But it's not everyone's cup of tea. And if it's not yours, there are, index funds and lots of other ways to get to Fi. It just takes a little bit longer. So I like real estate because it kind of supercharges that for you. And the main reason behind that is because if you kind of look at the pie chart of how we spend our money, housing is our biggest slice. And so if you can do something like a house hack, or if you can rent out your house on Airbnb or a room, well, now maybe you live for free, right? So that takes out that huge chunk that people spend 35 to 50% of their income on. And then the only other ones behind that is like transportation and food, but really it's the housing piece.
So typically when I'm doing this on YouTube, I'll grab a definition from, in this case, probably Bigger Pockets or Investopedia. But house hacking, I think that's when someone's living in the home with you and you rent out a home. Is that correct? To help either lower or pay off the mortgage?
Yeah, so you can rent out a room. That's a strategy where people have roommates, which, you know, we've been doing since the beginning of time. But other times people do different stuff where they'll have unofficial duplex where maybe there's a bottom unit in the basement, or they'll live in maybe an ADU and rent out the front house, or you just live in your house part-time like I do, where it's an Airbnb, but we live in it 6 months out of the year because that's what we have to do. And then we come and go. So yeah, lots of ways to hack your house.
I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Let me write that down. 6 months come and go. I like that. I live in Texas and wouldn't mind escaping for the summer. And I actually think it was Vincent who was saying they escaped Pittsburgh in the winter. So coincidentally,
you guys should just trade.
You know, I know someone in the FinCon community that did that. So you might. Yeah. I won't derail. Pay some bills around here, and I'll come back to the question, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. You spoke to one of them. The Marcus Garrett Show is made possible by our partners. If you want to learn a little bit more about index funds, you can actually scroll right down to your show description. That would be Jeremy of Personal Finance Club. But the ad that we have for this week is partners like Terry Zeona. Terry's a stock and options trader who encourages her over 100,000 Instagram followers to pursue their passions. You might have heard her story. She was a former teacher in a toxic environment, and she learned self-taught to trade, and now her students teaching them the same in the stock market, with many making up to $1,000 a day. You can find a link to both of these in your show notes, and if you'd like to hear our conversation, you can visit my website at themarcusgarrett.com/investwithterry, or check your video or podcast description below. And now back to the show. You also, and as we were transitioning to that conversation, you saying you say we had to come and go. Is that a choice? Like, are you doing it seasonally, or is that some of the regulations you talked about? Why that 6 months interaction?
Yeah, so I have been doing short-term rentals in Boulder County, and Boulder, the city, is where I live in Colorado, for 10 years. And so when I first started, nobody really knew about it, and it wasn't really a thing until I think they brought in the regulations 2018 or something like that. And so then they wanted it to be your primary residence. So that was going to be a minimum of 6 months. And so for us, we have a couple of other condos that we rent medium term where it's month to month, but then we have the one that we live in. And so our choice was that how could we just do exactly 6 months, and be out of our house a lot. And so what we found was pet sitting. And that's where I'm at right now, actually. I'm in a beautiful house in the mountains because in the wintertime, we want to go snowboarding a lot. So we're close to a ski mountain in a beautiful kind of lodge. I've got a fire crackling in the corner. That's why it looks so woodsy behind me. This will send people to your YouTube.
I did see I saw the new digs. I was like, oh, maybe she just came up,
Yeah, well, if you see me a lot, I'm in new digs all the time. So that's kind of our gig. So we pet sit for people for free, and then we rent out our house for about $200 a night.
And I do appreciate the plug to make it over to the YouTube channel. If you're not there, it's youtube.com/themarcusgarrett. And I am stalling so I can look up the book. I've been also stalling on reading. I've been, air quotes, for those who can't see me, working on reading How to Invest in Real Estate from Bigger Pockets by Josh Dorkin and Brandon Turner. They actually sent me a copy several years ago, and I keep picking it up because for me, it's been a mental block. It hasn't been a financial block. There's really nothing stopping me from going and investing in real estate. And I guess that could be true for anyone. And so I usually like to read something about it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to read this book and I'm going into it. And I think his name is Tom. Tom does investments. And he was like, hey, when you read the book, be happy to have a conversation about it. So I think that'll be a future series. Y'all can watch me crash or burn.
Did you know that I'm in that book?
No.
No, okay. I thought you brought it up because I'm in it. So
No,
you'll
no.
find it if you keep reading. I have a case study in that book.
Awesome. All right. Well, see, more incentive
Yeah.
for me to read, folks. This is why you needed it.
There you go. Go find Zeona.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think this is somewhat related. At least maybe folks can. It seemed easier pre-pandemic. It's almost like I'm mentally exhausted, but like all the time. So I read 24 books. I was reading 10 pages a day. It didn't seem like an effort, but now it feels like an undertaking. And I just feel like it's like this pandemic cloud that I also have to fight through. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to read 10 pages a day, but typically I just have a glass of wine and go to bed. So I'm trying
Yeah.
trying to recommit.
Well, do
Uh,
you throw in some like fun books? Because I find
I
that I
do.
need to do that.
Well,
Okay.
let me be very clear. I consider it fun. So every well, no one's asking me to, but roughly every month I share like my reads and just kind of what's been
Yeah.
going on. And one I was reading is The Ends of the World by Peter Brandon. Let me put an asterisk here because it sounds darker than it is. It actually talks about 7, I think, mass extinctions, which most people only know about the dinosaurs. I put it on my favorites list. It'd been there forever. And watched Don't Look Up with, what was that, Leonardo DiCaprio. And I was like,
Oh, yeah.
obviously a comet hit the earth. Well, hopefully that wasn't a spoiler. maybe I'll blink this out. Hashtag spoiler. Something happens in the movie that is very dark. And I was like, I need to read that book. So I typically like to, I call it my brain candy. This is what I tell the fiance. So I like to have a brain candy book. What is this guy's name? James Patterson. So I've read like almost all of James Patterson's books, but I like mystery novels and stuff like that. I read that, like that's my fun read. And then like, it's not to say the Bigger Pockets amazing book is not a fun read. But
It
it's a little
depends
bit
on the
more,
book.
it's a little bit more difficult to get through
Yeah.
10 minutes, So I usually just have to start.
Yeah.
It's like a gym. That's the hardest part, is just starting. So that was a challenge that came to me in like 2017 when I read those 24 books. So for any listeners, this is your first time here, I challenge you to read 10 pages a day. It can be of any book. It doesn't have to be personal finance like me. It just has to be my niche. That happens to be my niche and lane. So go ahead and try that out. And if you do it, drop it in the comments and I'll be your accountability partner. You can drop your reads when I drop them I actually do those on Instagram.
Okay, I have to tell you this, and then I'm going to leave you alone about the books. But Bigger Pockets has a book called Profit Like the Pros. And I find that one is so fun to read. And the reason being is that it's all case studies of different types of real estate, like how to do different types. And it's so fascinating. You're just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do self-storage. Oh my gosh, I want to do like mobile home parks. Like you get to hear all their really cool stories. So that one's a really fun, fast read. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I need to pivot because that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure
You
out.
need a
What is
fun one.
my Well, it not yes, that is a piece of it, but it's like what's my real estate lane, So it's my first time
Well,
going in
that's
it.
a
I don't
good
yeah,
sampler, right?
yeah. That's what I'm trying to solve. It's 2023. It's 2022 as of this episode, but we're getting married. And I told the missus like I'm doing something with real estate. I also had a spill about crypto because I had a guest on the show that talked about crypto. So she sees me coming around with all these fanciful ideas, and not as much into crypto as real estate. I've got this set amount of money after the wedding. And I was like, I want to do this and I want to do this. So that was my encouragement to read the Bigger Pockets book so I can be prepared to start to have that conversation. And then Tom, whom I hope I'm saying the right name, was like, yeah, I'd be happy to hop on the show and tell you about what he did. So he became FI independent, quit his job, and now he does it full time. And I don't know if he read that book or what his inspiration was, but I look forward to that conversation.
Cool. Me too. You have to let me know when that's out.
One of the ones that got us here was actually your podcast. Now, I think it was under the previous name, but it was episode 59, and I'll link it in the show notes. It was Achieving FI Through Savings, Real Estate, and Index Fund, and it was with the legendary J.L. Collins, who wrote one of my favorite books that I actually read when I was actually being committed and held myself accountable, The Simple Path to Wealth. But he had a new book coming out, and actually I think is out now, How I Lost Money in Real Estate Before It Was Fashionable. he said that his inspiration for writing the previous book, and I think she's much older now, was actually his daughter. And it was like, what inspires you? What legacy do you want to live? He's got a funny FU money video remake that y'all can probably find on YouTube. I know it's on his website. So I use that as a segue to what inspired you to go into real estate.
Wow. It's funny that I don't get asked that question very much. So I really appreciate it because it's making me think about it. But what I think it is that I just love houses. And so as a kid, my mom used to do this thing. We didn't have a lot of money, but she would love to just like remove all the furniture around in a different configuration. So I'd come home from school and at first it would be like kind of off-putting. And then I'd be like, oh, I like the freshness, like this is over here, and now we're doing it this way. And I don't do it in my own home, but I think that gave me a spark of like, here's the magic of what a house is. Here's how you can make a space feel different and how you can nest and feel nurtured by your home. So if that's a good answer.
It is, because it inspired another question, and it is
great.
Either would you recommend or do you have to love it to do it? And if that's not clear, what I mean by that is I was having several conversations recently, and probably will for the next few years until I figure out the next step or pivot in my life. But my career, still great, job functionally the same. But for lack of a better way to describe it off the top of my head, is I've become more dissatisfied with it because it doesn't tap into it. I guess I'm not getting that same dopamine hit that I used to get in my 20s and 30s. I've been a career auditor for folks that have not heard that spill before. And then, the natural instinct is to be like, oh, the job sucks. It's the job's fault. But I was like, the job hasn't changed. The job is the exact same thing I've been doing. I just been doing it for 15 or 20 years. So I had to kind of reflect and reframe on what I need to do and what purpose do I have, 39 going on my fourth decade around the sun. And so if someone were to go into real estate or is thinking about going into real estate, do they need to love it?
I don't think so. I think that I came to real estate for the houses and I stay for the hustle. I think what's really fun is just like the art of the deal. And I hate to say that because I'm not a Trump fan, but that's the name of his book. But there really is this just like finding a deal, like negotiating a deal, figuring out how you're going to afford this deal, partnering with people. It's just like, it's so great. The whole thing just sparks all of these creative juices. And so, yeah, for me, that's what it is.
Now, I'm reflecting back on these two episodes, going back to your conversation with J.L. Collins. He said here, I liked working. I just didn't like doing it all the time. And he took a lot of, I'm not sure if it's his term, but I've heard this more often, is mini sabbaticals. I think he called it level stepping. So stepping down from each level versus outright retirement, or FI. I think you and Cody Berman of the FI show also talk about cash flow FI, which is a concept which I really like now because, well, it's quicker. So that's another reason I obviously like it. I guess my question there is, it sounds like you're doing either a lifestyle similar to that, or, for someone who wants to, how can they use real estate, either income or opportunities for mini sabbaticals, or if you have another term of art?
Absolutely. I can tell you a story, actually. So I'm full of stories because we've been writing this book and we're including a lot of case studies. So they're just like in here. But there is a friend of mine, he's called The Traveling Dutchman, and he wrote a book called Get Paid for Your Pad. It was like the first book about Airbnb. So if you're thinking about doing short term, check him out on Amazon. But basically, he found out about Airbnb when he was traveling already. So he had gotten burned out from his job, and he owned this property in Amsterdam, but was renting it long term. And so he was in Brazil, and he heard from a friend, hey, let's go rent this Airbnb. And so he learned this whole concept of Airbnb and said, ooh, that's cool. Maybe I can rent my place in Amsterdam. And so while he was traveling, he was able to change that $1,500 a month to $5,000 a month. And so at $1,500, he was just kind of breaking even. He knew he would have to go back to work. At $5,000, he never had to work again. So he's kind of pivoted since then because Amsterdam did change their laws. He had to sell that place and buy elsewhere, but he was able to kind of retire if you're using geo arbitrage, like living somewhere cheaper as he was, from one property. So that's kind of like the magic, is that you just don't really, that wasn't around in real estate before, not before short-term rentals. And you had to have maybe 15 properties to replace an income. But now, you could have just the one and change your lifestyle a little bit. So it really all depends.
Hope I can walk through this without butchering it too much, because it's another person's example. But I used to curate podcasts for All Star Money. That program has been sunset, but you can find out where you can find Jay Money and Nate and still follow the team. But in one of the episodes I was listening to, a woman was talking about, again, finding her niche is that she only uses equity. She only pulls out equity from the home. Is that any experience? First of all, does that make any sense to you? So she takes equity out of the home, invests that more real estate. And now she's multiplied her properties from there. Are you familiar with that concept? And if so, how does that one work and how does it differ?
Yeah, so people have this saying that your real estate can buy you more real estate. And so there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can either sell, and so using something like the 1031 exchange, which allows you to not pay tax, it defers it, and you can defer it forever, technically. But you can do that, and then you can buy more properties with the equity. And so you could take one property that you sold and buy 6 properties if you wanted to. So sometimes people spread it that way. But the way she's talking about is she was doing either a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit, or she was doing a cash out refinance. And so if you're in a market that appreciates a lot, you can do that. And you're basically using your home as a piggy bank, but then you're going out and you're using it for down payments elsewhere. And so that's a great strategy too. It could be a little bit slower, but who knows? It depends on how much you're appreciating.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, unfortunately, I'll get it for the show notes I do not remember the episode. I do remember the woman. I mean, it might be nice just to have her on the show, but I just thought that was a fascinating concept. And it seemed to strike me as someone, I think, probably both naturally and getting my feet wet, that would probably be more conservative, which is really a nice way of, like, I'm scared shitless. So I don't want to go out there and lose everything. So I was like, oh, that sounds fascinating. So I wanted to kind of like, give these various options to people, in addition to your book, of course, that will be out in December. And
totally. Let me mention something to that. Yes, Profit Like the Pros is a great one. But what I do personally is I'm currently still in an active role. Like, I still sell real estate, and I take all of my active income and I use it to create passive income. So instead of going out and buying a Mercedes, I'm going to go out, buy a house that creates passive income that can pay for the lease on the Mercedes, right? So I'm trying to figure out systems like that where I know that I won't be in an active role forever, but right now I love it. And so I'm like, put it all into passive income. So, there's different ways to look at it, but your active income is taxed a lot heavier than passive is. And so that's why I'm funneling it that way.
When you say that you're selling real estate, are you licensed, or how? If not, how are you going about doing so?
Yeah, I'm a real estate agent in Colorado, and I have a team. Yeah.
Because we had a gentleman, Ruben, on the show, and I think
Proven by Ruben.
Yes,
I love him.
Thanks for saving me, by the way. Well, I try to name drop. I'm like one of the people that do name drop. I'm like, we talked to this individual, and you should go talk to them because they're awesome. I don't name drop non-awesome. Totally. I don't name drop bad interviews. So.
Yeah, he's got a really fun YouTube channel, so definitely check him out.
Cool. And then let me jump back over here. For those of you at home, you have no idea where I'm jumping. But one of the quotes are actually from, in this case, J.L. Collins, and I've seen it said in several different ways, and I think it's more relevant or more at the top of mind for conversations during the pandemic. I've heard all the remixes, the Great Resignation and the Great Reshuffle and the Great, I call it the Great Remix because there's so many R's, but there was another R one. Maybe it'll come back to me. But he said, if you're in a soul crushing job, I wouldn't spend another minute there, which of course sounds easier said than done. He said one quote, and I've had several on and offline conversations about this. I don't know anyone savvy enough to accumulate 1 million that can't figure out how to make 100,000. Any thoughts to that, or thoughts on that quote?
That's interesting. I don't remember it from the episode, but obviously it was there. Um, yeah, I mean, I honestly think anybody can get to 100,000. That seems to be an easy enough hustle, but I think it's just the mental barriers. So yeah, if you can get to 100,000, you can get to a million. If you've got that same mindset, you can kind of go anywhere with it, I think.
And yeah, what I think he was in that topic of conversation, because I have some people. I think it's difficult if or when you haven't gotten to 100,000. I think any level you're not at is hard to imagine. So when I was making
Oh, of course.
30,000, I would have never thought I'd be at 100,000. And also when I was making 30,000, if I'd gotten 100,000, I thought, I'm done. I'm done. I made it. Me and well, I use another example. Me and Diddy. Me and Diddy,
Yeah.
we're trading stories on the yacht. That's what I thought. Because of course, when I was making 30,000, I was 22, I think, something like that.
Mm,
And then if y'all want to check this out, it's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can find on my Instagram if you want the actual quote. But it said, within my lifetime, there's been a inflation, because we're all talking about inflation right now, of 240%. So what does that translate to? That means someone born in 1980 making 100,000 would need to make 341,000 to have the same buying power. Because I have actually been trying to wrap my head around, like, I make more than ever, but it doesn't feel like it. Some of that is quite literally emotional,
yeah.
but some of it is quite literally 200% has been eaten up by inflation. And so that's why I'm like, I try to focus what's on within my control. And I was like, well, that sucks, but I can't get rid of inflation. And
Yeah,
apparently neither can the
I
federal
feel
government.
you.
So maybe I can level up through these various income streams. So I'm trying to find, at this point in my pivot, what makes me happy that also makes me money. And that's an honest point
Yeah.
for me, because I'm building up to something here. He says, controlling for your expenses makes people think of deprivation, and let older me take care of myself. And then he says it's about spending on what's important. And I'm trying to find actively what that lifestyle looks for me. So it's interesting that it seems like you found an avenue for that through real estate, which is encouraging to me, because it'll be the next thing that I'll be exploring. I guess
Yeah.
any thoughts on either, I feel like a lot of people do feel that way, that cutting back is inherently deprivation. And so it sounds like you've done both passive and active. And you talked about the gentleman from Amsterdam that was, originally just barely making it. So how do you do that, or speak to that person who's like, well, I like the lifestyle I have. I like I've become accustomed to certain things. I need to have a latte. I'm not going to give up the latte factor. Um,
Yeah.
what would be your conversation with that person?
I think it's easier when you start young. So that's the first thing I'd say, is that if anybody's in college, just don't lifestyle creep, because it's just easier to stay that way if you've got it. But if you've already changed your lifestyle, the thing that I would say is that when you have more time, you need less treats or reassurances or things that cost money. And my example for that is there was a period of time that I took almost 2 years off where I first reached my financial independence. And at that time, I didn't have a ton. I was really just cash flowing maybe 2,500 a month, but I had a home. I was living for free, and that was enough for me to live off of really simply. And so I had a lot of time. I had the luxury of time. So instead of driving my car, I would ride my bike places, and that was really fun. And then I would show up there and I'd be in a great mood. And then I'd go cook meals with friends at their houses. And I made a lot of friends at that time that had really flexible schedules. So we could do things in the middle of the day. And so instead of eating out, we were going to each other's houses with bags of groceries and making stuff. And it was just a fun activity. So I think when you have a lot of time, you just need less money. And so that's the pivot, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, he says here, I muted because there's a small but loud dog, our neighbor. And he says here, and we can move to the wrap if it lets you have any thoughts or possible pushback. Your car will get old, you will get old, but time and freedom never depreciate. I thought that was a great quote.
Yeah,
Especially
it is a great quote.
Yeah, we're all kind of like reevaluating our time and our purpose.
Absolutely.
So I guess in conclusion there, any thoughts or anything else that you want to plug around time and purpose, or has any of that changed for you either through the pandemic, or have you become more grateful for the focus you already had for the last 10 years?
I've gotten way more organized since the pandemic. I joined a group that's kind of like a mastermind with accountability, and that's really helped me figure out ways to be just more effective. And so I am really appreciative of time. And I do think that my time right now is a bit committed than what I used to have. And so going back to that luxury of just a lot of spaciousness sounds pretty good. I think I will be working towards that. But I agree. I think there are probably one or two areas where it makes a lot of sense and you get a lot out of spending money. For me, I love having a nice car, but that's not everybody's need. So, for JL, maybe it's only just travel because I know him and he loves to travel. So it just depends. Find your one area and really spend the money there, and then the other ones skimp around.
And I also like, as you were talking about earlier, as far as your active and passive, you found a way for your active income to pay for like the leased vehicle, because that's something you like, but you found a way through your niche to pay for it, which is what I'm trying to do with the Marcus Garrett brand and all these other multiple income streams. I literally wrote out in the pandemic, I took a notepad and I told the missus, I was like, this would be the ideal state. And I like circled all the things that we do. And I was like, and then the business would just pay for all those things. Obviously that's like, maybe not everybody's dream, but that's every entrepreneur's dream. It pays for all these things and then some. So that's what I'm trying to scale it to, and hopefully will. And folks are watching the journey this week, or excuse me, I guess in totality, as we move from employed to entrepreneur. And I try to figure out what season 4's new. I try to do a themed season. So I'm already brainstorming what season 4 will look like, which for me derives happiness. Like I like to. I don't think I'm controlling. Maybe I am, but I like to control for the things that are important to me. So I was like, it's super cool to be thinking about 2023 already. It feels like I'm in the future. I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna drop this episode. It's like, I feel like
My goodness.
The Flash.
I don't want to think about that. I'm like, it's too far.
See, I love it. I was super excited. I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna drop that, and they're not ready for this. We'll move to the wrap here. For a shout out on the upcoming show, sound off in the comments with a 5-star review. Share your favorite quote from today's episode, and your reviews help more awesome people just like you find the smooth sounds of the Marcus Garrett Show. And thank you for coming on the show, Zeona. Please let them know where they can find you.
Oh, well, Instagram's the easiest one. It's Zeona McIntyre, but I am on everything. So Facebook's a good place. We have a group called Airbnb Investing. And so if you want to look on Facebook and learn about investing in short or medium term, find us there.
Will do. I think I'll be one of the people joining.
Good. You can put all your questions in there. We love it.
I'm a lurker. I'm more of an introvert and search type of guy, but y'all will know I'm present. I'll give you a bunch of likes and hearts.
Nice.